Hello, everyone. Hola, mundo. Welcome back to Voces Poderosas, where Latino brilliance takes center stage. I'm your host, Jackie Bouvier, and today we're shining the light on a true pioneer in business leadership and Latino representation. George Herrera, President and CEO of the Herrera Cristina Group Ltd. George is a trailblazing entrepreneur and former president and CEO of the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, where he championed the growth of Latino businesses nationwide. Today, he leads a powerhouse firm serving Fortune 500 companies in marketing, communications, and corporate diversity, while also serving on the board of directors for Travel and Leisure Co. From creating the nationally syndicated TV show Hispanics Today to being honored with the Lifetime Business Achievement Award, felicidades, by the Hispanic Heritage Foundation. Whoa, George, you're just a legacy. You continue to shape and elevate Latino excellence across the industries. I cannot tell you enough how proud I am of you and how honored I am to have you on Voces Poderosas. Bienvenido, George.
Muchas gracias, mil gracias, Jackie. Te quiero felicitar a través del esfuerzo de tu podcast. It's my honor and a pleasure to be with you and be here and being able to share a little conversation in terms of where we are and hopefully what the future holds for the great Latino community and for individuals like yourself, trailblazers, entrepreneurs. Yeah, yo estoy viejito, so I'm moving out, and we need to have new, fresh blood such as yourself to step up to the plate and continue to be champions of the Latino community in the United States. So, te felicito. Te felicito.
Ay, gracias. Thank you so much. That means a lot to me. As you know a little bit about me, but I'd love for everyone in our audience to hear about you. Why don't you share your journey? Tell us, how did you get to become this amazing George Herrera that has always been? Tell us your steps and teach us about your journey, and we'd love to hear everything about you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity again, Jackie. I'm a kid from Brooklyn, New York, and I guess my trajectory and my ability to have been successful, I think, has been founded on different types of occurrences and incidences that happened in my life that served as a foundation, for my growth. Unfortunately, at the age of 13, I lost my father in my arms. He bled to death and died when I was 13 years old. During Christmas, tragic accident, fell down the basement stairs. I was 13. And after that tragic death, my brother-in-law, who was married to my sister, my older sister, became my father figure. And him and my sister started a small management and financial consulting firm in 1975 in New York. Small shop, about 4 or 5 individuals. And he stepped in. He became my mentor. He started guiding me. And 1979, 10 years to the month that my father passed in my arms, my brother-in-law David died in a car accident in
Ay,
Long
ay,
Island. So at the age of 22, the most two influential males in my life, were taken away from me. My sister had the small firm that was just starting, 4 or 5 people. This tragedy happened in 79. And my sister said, no, let's close up shop. And I said, well, sis, let's try to do this. I'd rather try and succeed than wonder what if. Let's give it a shot. And jokingly, she said, okay, fine, George. Congratulations. You're now the president of the company. I was, 23 years old.
mm.
And I said, you got to be kidding me. And that was 79. By 1981, we had 15 offices, 150 employees. We were the largest Hispanic woman-owned management and financial consulting firm in America, driven by my sister, Elizabeth Burgos, who was the CEO of the firm.
Wow.
And we did that for almost 25 years. We ran the company for almost 25 years. We were predominantly a federal government contractor. But what's interesting again is the experiences that that you learn from these journeys, right? Because it was not fashionable in the late 70s, 80s, and 90s for a Latina to take the risk of becoming an entrepreneur, and then seeing all the obstacles, racism, unnecessary insults that she was always up against trying to just become an entrepreneur and run the company. was quite interesting for me. So it allowed me to, to understand, not only understand the trials and tribulations that it would take for us to be extremely successful, but also how to navigate that landscape and how to play within that landscape and to kind of understand it. So that kind of was my foundation in terms of entrepreneurship. And my sister always told me from the very beginning, she says, surround yourself by people that know more than you and keep your eyes and ears open. And that's what I did initially. And it allowed us, to grow the company. She kind of retired and said, brother, here, you try to run it. And then I said, no, we can't make that happen. And then the opportunity in 1998 came where there was a vacancy for the presidency and CEO of the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce in Washington, D.C. And we at Burgos, we have 15 offices. The name of our firm was Burgos and Associates. We had 15 offices in Chicago, in D.C., in New York, in Connecticut, in Boston, in New Jersey. So we had kind of a regional footprint with only one office in the Midwest, even though it was our largest office. We had about 45 employees in Chicago for about 20 years. So, uh, 98, the opportunity came for me to consider, whether or not I wanted to try to run the USHCC. I thought it would give me a national platform to drive an agenda that I thought was very important based on my experiences, and that was the lack of Hispanic participation in corporate America within the corporate boardroom and within the
Mhm.
C-suite, and start to become an advocate, for our community in those particular areas. And
Wow.
obviously, when you're at the chamber and you have the bully pulpit, that kind of unlocks lines of communication for you with CEOs of major corporations, So that kind of allowed me to develop, an ability to talk and negotiate with a lot of these CEOs to unlock opportunities for our community through the chamber. That resulted in, I had a vision to create a national TV show called Hispanics Today. I did not have any TV experience, in the area, but I thought that it was important that our story be told outside of sports and politics. I wanted our story to be told in business, in education, in the arts, in music, and to start to show our community the positive trials and the positive contributions that we were making across all segments of American society. And NBC bought they said, hey, we like the idea. We're going to put you on the first Sunday of every month after Meet the Press.
Wow.
And 6 months later, they called me and said, hey, your show is a success. When can you go weekly? And this was 1998, around the same time I joined the chamber. So just a lot of things aligned, Jackie. A lot of things aligned that not only gave me the bully platform to be able to articulate what I thought was an appropriate message for my constituency, but also I had a lines of communication, right? I had a medium. I had a medium where I can articulate my message also to the masses in the United States. And we had about 30 million viewers a week. So, that's kind of a little bit of, just kind of what took me up to the chamber. And it was through those relationships at the chamber that I had the pleasure of meeting Henry Silverman, who was the CEO of Sendin. Sendin was a Fortune 40 company generating almost $40 billion a year in revenue. This was 2003. They owned Avis, Budget, Coldwell Banker, Century 21, Jackson Hewitt, Wyndham Hotels. They were just a conglomerate, and Henry was their CEO. And he came and he spoke at our convention in Phoenix, Arizona in 2003. And I had about 1,500 people at the opening breakfast. Our galas usually would draw 2,900 people. A lot different than the current state of affairs, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
And after Henry spoke, the next day I got a phone call from Henry saying, "I just like what you saw, and I like the commitment and passion you have for your community, and we don't have a Latino on the board at Sendin. Would you be interested in joining our board?" And that's exactly how it happened. There was literally the day after he spoke at the Phoenix convention, and he said to me, And then on the research that I did, I then realized that I was 46 years old. So that was 2003. So I became the youngest Hispanic ever appointed to a Fortune 40 board in 2003. So that's kind of what led me into currently sitting on the board also now of Travel and Leisure.
Wow. We often see and hear about people like yourself. And myself, I'm like, wow, who started this? Who did this? Oh, and then you find you're like, oh, I wish I could meet so and so, from Hispanics Today or whatever. And here I am, Voces Poderosas, talking to the amazing George. It's like I am kind of starstruck, to be honest with you, and listening to your story. And a lot of times we try to find ways to navigate the journey, but your journey is yours, but for us to learn from. And I appreciate you sharing that. Tell us a little bit about where you are now in your current company, I believe, right? That is Herrera Cristina Group. And also, give us some advice to our younger generation.
Well, the Herrera Cristina Group is a multidisciplinary firm that provides management, marketing, consulting services to Fortune 1000 companies. So we help them in the areas of, corporate responsibility, areas of supplier diversity, C-suite, and so on. And we have a long cadre of, Fortune 1000 companies that have been our customers since 2003. The firm was also established in 2003 when I joined the board at Sendit. And we provide those services. And what you've seen, though, is interesting times, right, Jackie? We understand the impact that, the political environment is now having on corporate America, right? The abolishing of DOE programs, let's say on the federal level. You see major corporations right now taking a different look in terms of how they implement their diversity and inclusion initiatives within corporate America simply because of the political structure that's out there, right? So I'm a firm believer, as I have been to all companies that I serve on, that and particularly in the hospitality community, that if I'm good enough to stay in our resorts and our hotels and our timeshare companies, now timeshare being that I'm in Travel and Leisure, then we're good enough to sit in the boardroom, we're good enough to be in the C-suite, okay, and we're good enough to be executives within the company. So that kind of reciprocal relationship, I believe, is important for major corporations to continue to have under the enormous amount of stress that they're under with the pressure that they're getting to abolish, a lot of the diversity and inclusion initiatives that for the last 20 years have really provided a foundation for many within our community to develop the entree into some of these major corporations. We have to be cognizant of the fact that those initiatives have opened some doors. Okay, they're not the only path, but they have opened some doors. But what's happening now is that they're rolling in like the elimination of supplier diversity programs within the abolishing of DE&I. So now you're going to start to take a look at, well, now what impact does this have on major corporate on Latino entrepreneurs that are doing business with Fortune 1000 companies? Okay, so the impact is multitude. The impact is on the citizenry in general, and also on the Hispanic, entrepreneur. So we need to learn how to navigate that space right now, because it's a space that is going through a lot of differentiation right now. And it's a space that we need to say, how also is that going to impact our leading national Latino nonprofit organizations? We have to be very realistic. That's unfortunate in our community, Jackie, and that is that the existence of a majority, if not all, of the major Latino organizations in the United States, nonprofits, major nonprofits, their financial viability lies in the checks they get from corporate America.
I know that.
It doesn't come from our general population. It doesn't come from 60 million Latinos cutting a check to send them to all of our leading national organizations, right? So you're now seeing the impact corporately on these corporations. You're seeing the potential impact on the funds that they provide to major leading national advocacy organizations within our community, right? So a lot of these firms are going to be, struggling to get a lot less of the dollars that are currently out there. And that's why I'm a big proponent and have been for 15 or 20 years that it is time for our national leaders of these major organizations to get together and establish a national Hispanic economic blueprint for our
Oh,
for our community. We need a national economic blueprint that the entire Hispanic community can galvanize. We have to
wow.
recognize we have commonality of language, but we
Mm,
have extreme diversity of culture in the Hispanic community. And what plays sometimes in the West Coast doesn't play in South Miami. And what plays in South Miami sometimes doesn't play in New York. And what
right.
plays in New York doesn't necessarily play in Dallas or Denver or Chicago. But our concerns and the way to empower our community economically needs to supersede all of that and needs to try to serve as the impetus to get these national Hispanic leaders together. And now, hopefully, they are realizing that true economic empowerment in our community will never be attained until we have the political power and might to be able to influence decisions that are most pertinent to what is important, to the growth and development of the Latino community in the United States. So I think that, we're at a crossroads. I
Yeah.
think our community is at a crossroads, and I think that it's time for a lot of these leaders to step up, and it's hard, Jackie, right? Because each one of these is a matter of survival for them in a lot of their major not-for-profits, right? I mean, they're just trying sometimes now to get by day to day because they've seen the pullback in terms of funding. And I've talked to several of these presidents where they have seen drastic pullback in their funding. So, we need to understand that the landscape economically and politically in the U.S. is changing.
Mm.
Our youth need to understand those dynamics and those parameters, and they need to see, within those parameters, where is that intersecting component that they can be of influence in and of importance in. And I think that that is one of the most pertinent obstacles I think that confront our community right now.
I find it interesting that you mentioned this blueprint and, um, it just makes me think, right? Because we are diverse even within our own Latino community. So being able to bring together that type of unity within the community, even politically, culturally, um, the language unifies us, but what about those different mindsets? And I think it'd be interesting to have a blueprint with the different diverse mindsets together. And I don't know what your vision is for that, but I'd love to hear a little bit more of that. I think it's a very important piece that you've mentioned, specifically during this, I guess I would call it transitionary period for our community, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, what you're seeing is, we've seen what's going on. We've seen what's emanating out of DC, and we see what's going on nationally. Right at the same time, we need to have a constructive conversation and a constructive dialogue within our communities to say, listen, this is the lay of the land today. This is the
Mm-hmm.
lay of the land, and how do we effectively navigate within those barriers and obstacles that are there, and how do we continue to try to grow the entrepreneurial segment of our community, which I think is important. I think we need to, have a lot more cultural affinity even within our own community. It's,
Yeah.
Latinos buying from Latinos, right? Hey, who
Yes.
represents you? A Latino CPA. Hey, who represents me? A Latino lawyer. Why? Because we have the expertise and we have the talent within our community to say that we have this kind of dynamic community that can represent the needs of our community. So I think it's important that we start to develop that cultural affinity, especially as we continue to grow. We keep throwing out all these numbers. Every conference that you go to, it's the
Yes. They
the
motivate us.
GDP, the GDP. So in in
But
in
what's
two
next?
in 2000, I was in the year 2000 as CEO at the chamber. I was talking about the extraordinarily enormous growth of the Hispanic consumer and the purchasing power with our community. and we're the leading ethnic power, and so on. And we're throwing that in a way, we throw it out there, and we just think that by throwing it out there, it's going to create impact. And it doesn't happen that way. It doesn't happen that way. I think we also, need to start to be accountable to those now, that those Latinos within our communities now that do sit on public company boards. Okay, let's have a talk. What's happening?
Yeah,
What are you doing? You
that's
know,
good.
are hopefully you're being an advocate for supplier diversity, for inclusion in the C-suite. Hopefully you're being, proactive to, maybe not be the only Hispanic on the board or get one or two of the board. Are you asking the necessary questions that need to be asked? You now have a seat on the public company board. You have the ability to start asking some pertinent questions. Yes, we all know our primary responsibility is a fiduciary one to our shareholders. But at the same time, we need to have the same influence and concerns and dialogue with our stakeholders. And
Hmm.
that's why it's important. And that's why I think that, it's all good that we continue to promote more Latinos on boards, and that it's important. And several years ago, about 2.5 years ago, I chair governance at Travel and Leisure. I had a conversation with our chairman and our CEO, and I said, hey, I would like to add, a Latina to the board, a person of color and or a Latina to our board once we do our search. And, the initial reaction is we don't have a vacancy. So we sat down and we said, and we agreed, through my conversations with our chairman and CEO, that, you know what, why don't we expand the board and create a new seat? And what? That's an old playbook in many corporations where the other CEOs want to get their best friends on the board.
Hmm.
They'll expand the board. They'll add an extra seat. But we did it from the standpoint that both our chair and our CEO says, you're absolutely right. We need that perspective. How now let's align it with what one of our corporate objectives and needs are. And after a rigorous search, we got Lucinda Martinez
Wow.
appointed to the board of directors at Travel and Leisure, and she's now going almost on 3 years on the board.
Nice.
Exemplary background in history at Time Warner, at HBO, at Netflix. Understands the core elements of the business of travel and leisure and the timeshare industry. So it was a perfect alignment within her skill sets, but at the same time, I, as a Latino member of the board and or only one who also happens to be chair of governance, said it's time to have this conversation. So what I'm asking and I'm saying is that, pretty soon we may need to have a report card on those that currently sit on these boards to kind of
Yeah.
say, hey, it's great that you're on these boards, but let's talk about have you had the influence that can result in more opportunities for our community, whether it's supplier diversity, C-suite, employment, foundation giving, and so on, right? So, we want, I am hoping that we reach the point that we have, a large component of those that Latinos that currently sit on public company boards to try to also say, hey, how can I be of influence within my corporation to see how I can unlock more opportunities for my community, across all the different segments that I just articulated. I think that we also need, and that's all part of a component of a national economic development blueprint. That's all part of that. So yeah, yo estoy viejito and it's time for
Oh,
me to step aside, but I think our future leaders really need to have this conversation. It's one that I've mentioned 10 years ago. And I said,
wow.
we need to have this conversation.
I love it. And I love all the advice that you're giving. And I think it's essential. It's a need and I appreciate it and I fully value it and I'm sure all of our audience will. And as much as I'd like to stay here for an hour, but or maybe all day. But I have to cut it, and I know that it pains me because you have so much to say and so much that can help us in this country, specifically during this time frame. But George, it's been an absolute honor to hear your journey, and your wisdom is just phenomenal. And I I encourage you to continue sharing with everyone about this blueprint for the United States. I think it's something that is going to just unite the Latino community. And so thanks for serving as a leader, a beacon, for inspiring me and inspiring everyone that's listening. And thank you also for your extraordinary impact to our country and everything that you've done and for representing and thinking about someone else to pull them up to that seat at the table, which we hear about so much. So gracias, George. Thank you for being on Voces Poderosas today.
Thank you, Jackie. I really appreciate the opportunity. Godspeed, and I wish you all the success as you're out there being one of our leading Latina entrepreneurs. So keep up the good work. We're very, very
Yeah.
proud of you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.